Welcome. You've got emo stuff. Saturdays on Planet Radio
106.7
with Hunter deBlanc.
Planet Radio 106.7. Welcome back to Saturdays. I'm Hunter deBlanc, playing all your favorite emo and pop punk stuff, all that early Warped Tour era's music. You'll hear it right here Saturday nights at 7 p.m. Central Time. And you may know my guest this week is the singer of the band Armor for Sleep. This week we have Ben Jorgensen. Ben, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great, brother. I'm great. So, Ben, I've always been fascinated with the story behind the band's name, Armor for Sleep. So for our listeners who may not be familiar, or for any fans tuning in who may not know the story behind the band's name, would you mind telling us a little bit behind that, the lore behind the Armor for Sleep name?
Yeah, so this was a long time ago. I started this band when I was 17, but from what I can remember, I think this holds up. So at that time in my life, I had been playing drums in my band with my best friends for about 7 years, a band called Random Tasks. After our senior year in high school, we were all going to college. I decided I wanted to quit that band because I had been writing a bunch of my own songs and I wanted to front a band and play guitar and sing. But that meant I had to quit my other band. So for this summer, I was working on what would become Armor for Sleep, and I was in a very weird place because I didn't really have my best friends in my life anymore. I was holed up in my room by myself trying to write songs and brainstorm a project, and because of that, I wasn't really sleeping at all. So I was staying up till 5 a.m. trying to write what would become the first Armor for Sleep songs. And Armor for Sleep was kind of my mantra at that time because this band, A, it kept me up at night and kept me from going to sleep, but B, once I did get creative and start writing songs, it would actually make me tired and help me go to sleep. So I was thinking a lot about sleep. I'm thinking a lot about not sleeping. And so Armor for Sleep just seemed like the perfect name for the band. And also it sounded cool.
It does indeed sound cool. And I've always enjoyed the correlation between the story behind the band's name, the subject matter, and the song topics on the first album by the band, Dream to Make Believe. So does the story behind the name go hand in hand with the idea to make a concept album that dealt with topics like being asleep, time travel, space, and all the things that album dealt with?
Yeah, well, thank you for picking up on those topics that definitely went into our early material. You know, honestly, I think when I was starting this band, I was trying to think about what would make this band different and unique from everything else going on at that time. It was definitely a goal of mine, how to make it different. And what I circled back on was I'm a unique individual, so I knew if I imparted what I thought made me unique into the band, that would help the band be unique. And those topics like sleeping and dying and isolation and loneliness, I guess, are things that I personally think about a lot. So I was, I consciously wanted to impart the band with those things that I knew I had a lot of experience dealing with. So that's why those themes are there. I really wasn't reaching far outside of myself. Those are things that have always interested me and, interested me back then. So those are just things that I carry with me.
At what point did you realize that you had a number of songs that all had dealt with some of the same topics and you were like, you know what, why not just go all in with this?
So I have to be honest, with the first album, Dream to Make Believe, it was a little bit less intentional than, for instance, the second album, What to Do When You Were Dead, which was structured from the beginning to be a concept album. Dream to Make Believe, I think it was just more of the things that were swirling through my head at the time. And then in retrospect, it was an album that kind of dealt with very similar things. So I think that was just almost like an accidental concept album, if you will.
We're going to play something off of it right now. And it just so happens that every interview that I've done, my wife has not chimed in at all. But last night I posted a little teasers with a little picture of a knight that was sleeping. And I said, who can guess who our guest this week is? My wife rolled over and said, Armor for Sleep. Apparently she used this song in a high school project for something, with the title track from their 2003 album, Dream to Make Believe, released on Equal Vision Records. This is Armor for Sleep right here on Planet Radio 106.7.
You're listening to Saturdays. All of your favorite emo and pop punk songs, both old and new, with Hunter deBlanc on Planet Radio 106.7. Back to the sadness. It's Saturday on Planet Radio 106.7.
Planet Radio 106.7, welcome back to Saturdays. I'm here again with Ben of Armor for Sleep. So Ben, how did you guys get linked up with Gabe Saporta as a manager of Midtown? And then how did you guys also get linked up with Equal Vision Records for your first debut album?
So those two stories actually are kind of interconnected. The way we got set up with Gabe, there is some history between me and Gabe personally in that we went to the same high school. So when I was entering my freshman year of high school, Gabe had just graduated. I have two older sisters, though, who went to that same high school, and they knew Gabe because they were in school at the same time as him. And Gabe had an old band in New Jersey called Humble Beginnings, which was a pop punk band. Everybody in the New Jersey scene at the time loved Humble Beginnings, and I actually put on a show when I was 13 years old. And one of the bands that I hired to play was Humble Beginnings. So I had known Gabe for a long time. He knew me as Little Ben, who was always going to shows and booking shows. So I guess I was kind of on his radar. When I put out the Armor for Sleep demo, he somehow got a hold of it. I forget how he got a hold of it, but he knew, he remembered me from back in the day. And Midtown was on a little break, and so he actually started coming to our shows. He volunteered to take us under his wing and be our manager. Midtown had made some mistakes, I think he would say, coming up in terms of the deal that they signed or business decisions that they signed, and he wanted to protect me and Armor for Sleep from making those decisions. And so speaking of Equal Vision was a label at the time that was kind of circling the waters around us, and Gabe really made that connection between us and Equal Vision and reached out to them and helped us get our deal with Equal Vision signed. So it really was, with Gabe's help that whole thing kicked off.
Well, we're going to play the first track that I actually discovered by Armor for Sleep, which I 100% remember finding it on an Absolute Punk sampler. It was one of those monthly samplers that they sent out or they posted on their site. And speaking of Jersey, I'm assuming that this song is written about Jersey. The song is called My Town. Is there anything that stands out in Jersey that influenced you to write this song? Or are there any bands that influenced you from Jersey coming up?
I would say we wouldn't be a band. I wouldn't have written in the style of Armor for Sleep if it weren't for the amazing bands coming out of New Jersey at the time. I think two bands that I cite more than any other bands are Thursday and Saves the Day. And when I listen to our first album, Dream to Make Believe, I hear a 17-year-old version of myself trying to make an amalgamation of Thursday and Saves the Day. I was so influenced by both of those bands and so lucky to have been in high school when both of those bands came out in New Jersey. And on top of that, I was so lucky that Chris Connolly from Saves the Day and Jeff Rickley from Thursday were so warm to me when I was a kid at their shows, singing in the front row at the top of my lungs. They both were so kind to me and talked to me after shows and really made me appreciate that connection between fan and band is something that I still carry to this day. So yeah, Saves the Day and Thursday were huge for me. I was also a big fan of Midtown and everything that Gabe did.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Saves the Day. Literally every artist that we've had on has cited Saves the Day as one of their influences. Their influence just reached throughout the entire scene. Here's another one off of Dream to Make Believe by Armor for Sleep. The song is called My Town. Be listening out for influences from both Thursday and Saves the Day right here on Planet Radio 106.7.
This is Saturdays with Hunter deBlanc on Planet Radio 106.7.
Planet Radio 106.7. Welcome back to Saturdays. I'm here again with Ben Jorgensen of the band Armor for Sleep. And Ben, we're going to play something off of the band's sophomore album, What to Do When You're Dead. So this album transitioned from talking about sleeping on the first album to the big eternal sleep on the second album. What was the transition like in your mind space?
I go back to where I was in my life at the time and why I felt inclined to write a concept album about being dead. And I was 19 years old at the point where I was writing What to Do When You Are Dead. And it was a very transitional time in my life. I had dropped out of college. Gabe was managing our band. We decided to go on tour to do the band full time. But what that meant in 2002 was putting our stuff in a van and playing shows to 15 and 20 people a night, for months at a time. We'd be losing money, playing shows to people who had never heard of us. The successes of the band were very few and far between. You know, I was coming to realization with the fact that I had ditched a normal life. I had dropped out of college. I was not going to be a normal member of society at that point. You know, I was pretty convinced I wanted to play music forever and was scared, and I had just broken up with my first girlfriend at the time on top of all of that. So suffice it to say, I was just going through a lot. And I think when people are in their early 20s, no matter if they're in college, out of college, are facing the real world for the first time, it's the first time maybe outside of the house under their parents' care. And I was going through that as well. And I started to think about death and life and what my life means in the grand scheme of things. I don't think those are absolutely unique thoughts, and I think the fact that people have connected with What to Do When You're Dead over the years shows that I was tapping in with something that people go through at a certain time in their life. I was like, okay, I want to do a concept album about being dead, and I didn't think anybody really cared about Armor for Sleep at the time, and honestly, nobody really did care about Armor for Sleep at the time, and you know, I knew what I was doing was a little bit out there, but there also was zero pressure because at that time, nobody knew who we were, and you know, I just thought we'd be putting out this album that no one would really hear.
And this album pretty much changed the scope, because I remember seeing Armor for Sleep blowing up around this time, and I was so happy for you guys. With the opening track from their 2005 album, What to Do When You Are Dead, this is Car Underwater by Armor for Sleep right here on Planet Radio 106.7.
You're listening to SADurdays. All of your favorite emo and pop punk songs, both old and new, with Hunter deBlanc on Planet Radio 106.7. You're listening to SADurdays. All of your favorite emo and pop punk songs, both old and new, with Hunter deBlanc on Planet Radio 106.7. Back to the sadness. It's SADurdays on Planet Radio 106.7.
Planet Radio 106.7, that was The End of the World by Armor for Sleep off of the 2007 album Smile for Them. And shortly after that album was released, it also seemed to be the end of the world for Armor for Sleep. The band took a hiatus in 2009, and aside from playing a couple shows here and there, the band would remain slightly inactive until 2020. And in the last few years, we've seen a ton of activity from the band. What caused that chapter to come to a close in 2009?
In 2007, we recorded the album Smile for Them, which was when we had jumped to Warner Brothers Records. I think, you know, this story has been told a million times by a million different bands that jump to a major label and then are not kind of too stoked on what happened. A very similar thing happened to us. We signed to a major label. Well, the second we record our album and put it out, everybody who signed the band had already jettisoned from the label, so we had no team at the label who really cared about us. By that point, we'd been touring for 5 years solid. We were just kind of burnt out, and I made the decision I rather would have the band end on a high note than kind of like struggle along, you know, just kind of limping along, which is what I felt we would be doing if we kept going for a few years. So, you know, we kind of pulled the plug at that time and we're like, let's reconvene when we're a little bit in better places in our lives. And so I thought, you know, it was for the best of the band. And, you know, when we were ready to come back, it was a much brighter time for us, I think.
Well, you guys have done the Emo's Not Dead cruise. You hit the road with former guests of our show early November earlier this year. And we just got a new track from you guys 2 weeks ago, and we're about to play it. And we are back to talking about dreams again. So this song is called In Another Dream. What can we look forward to from Armor for Sleep for the rest of 2024 and possibly 2025?
I think I used to put a lot of pressure on myself and the band and spent a lot of time thinking about ourselves in the big picture and trying to overthink everything. And, you know, I'm at the point now where we have amazing fans who we're so lucky to have, who still come to our shows, who still listen to our music and are super excited about what we do. And I just feel very happy to be here. And I just want to keep being creative and putting out new music. And I'm done with overthinking things, you know. I just want to keep putting out music, keep touring, keep playing shows for our fans that keep coming out. Kind of this new world of putting zero pressure on the band. Just super honored to be able to do what we do.
So not so much worrying about what's next, just taking it as it comes, huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. And we're going to play a brand new track for our segment, New Song, Old Band. This song is called In Another Dream. Ben, I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, man.
And Monday, August 12th, you can check Ben out with his band Armor for Sleep at the Fillmore in New Orleans. And I will be there covering the show. Even though it's a Monday, I'll be there covering the show as SADurdays with Planet Radio 106.7. And you can hear some of this interview again next week along with our recap of the show. So Monday, August 12th at the Fillmore in New Orleans. We got Armor for Sleep. We got Thursday. We got Anne Berlin. We got Hawthorne Heights. We got Emory. And I'll be there covering the show as SADurdays with Planet Radio 106.7. I want to thank you for listening. Have a great Saturday night.
Goodbye.